Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Inspired Scholar podcast, where we discuss about all matters pertaining to education and how education is handled today.
Okay, today we're going to be talking about AI and how AI particularly affects education. I think it's a topic that we both think that it's a topic that affects a lot of people, right? There's a lot of doom and gloom out there. People are worried about their jobs, and I think teachers are no less sort of in a fear of AI. So we can start with what's happening right now in the classroom. Uh, and then we're going to move on to the pros and the cons. I'm going to be the con. I'm really into this part. As you can see, I get the nice caveman beard going on here, so very, very Luddite. And Charles over here is going to be the pro. But uh, currently, what's happening currently? So I think a lot of teachers will tell you AI can be used for examination markings, to speed things up, um, creating lesson plans for students. I think there's talk about in the future individualization of lesson plans. AI is going to be able to go over the student's performance and help a teacher come up with a plan that matches the student's learning style, right? There's things like online classrooms, digital classrooms, open online courses, and things like that that are currently being used. There's basically, I think, in a lot of ways, on in general, uh, I think what it's doing is automating a lot of the, let's say, grunt work in teaching. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's definitely AI as a tool and as a platform used today. Absolutely, it is very immensely beneficial, and we're actually seeing a lot of the mundane tasks that we used to really struggle with, which would take hours and hours of preparation work, literally compressed down to a few minutes. Right, all you have to do is have the right prompt and uh, be able to put in the right commands into the platform and then have it do most of the work for you. Uh, and so for that reason, there has been a lot of negative press about AI in terms of how students today are actually leveraging AI to do all their homework for them. When I was young, I was constantly using computers to my advantage to basically uh, to word process all of my homework, to basically put fancy covers, just basically make my presentations and make my reports that much better compared to other students who were handwriting. I don't think it's wrong. I don't think it's wrong that students are able to do this, right? To be able to leverage the tools. I don't think it's wrong that employees are able to leverage AI for their purposes, right? But I do have one issue with AI. Absolutely, I believe AI is immensely beneficial to everyone, students, teachers, and employees all alike, no matter what field you're in, right? I do take one issue, and that is how I think with the advent of an introduction of AI in today's world, I do think that schools need to reassess their purpose in terms of what are they actually teaching to the children, or what are you training the children to do, right? Because ultimately, in the end, using AI is a shortcut. But I personally think that it's okay to take the shortcut if you already know how to do it, right? So if you're still learning to do it, then you shouldn't be doing that,
I
right?
actually have an argument even against. I think just to counter that from the part from you is it's okay to take a shortcut. I don't. I think. Uh, let me see if I can address this in a very intelligent way. This one, the human brain is plastic, right?
Yeah.
So use it or lose it, so to speak.
Yeah.
It and also, I mean, let's be honest. Despite what we see on television of the go-getters and everybody wanting to study and all this kind of thing, the general person in the world is lazy, right? We all are. I mean, to a certain degree, some less than others, but we all, at a certain point, if you can take the easier road, most people will. Therefore, if you are even if you know something, even if you're an expert at it, but you choose to take the easy road. You do it enough times, you lose that function, even if you're an adult. Which I think is probably one of the reasons, as an example, where you will have teachers today who, math teachers who couldn't hold a candle to the math teachers of our age. Why? Because they all use computers and calculators, whereas teachers of our age, a lot of times, did it in their head. I mean, maybe not the high level calculus calculations, but general. I mean, I had math teachers that could calculate algebra in their head, algebra equations in their heads, and give it to you, right? And that, again, that's probably a teacher that can probably explain it to you a bit better. So if you do have this shortcut, and use it once or twice, yeah, of course, maybe that's not really the difficulty here. However, given human nature, I think if you keep doing that, you will end up having people, even experts, who are no longer experts, because the whole use it or lose it thing is true, right? The human brain, if you just stop doing, I mean, again, you speak Chinese. If I was to take you at your age, the grandpa dinosaur age, and drop you in the middle of Poland, and you never have to speak Chinese again, and you have to learn Polish, and I talk to you in 25 years, your Chinese would probably almost, well, it might still be there, but it would be very, very rough.
Yeah.
If you didn't open your mouth in
Mm,
Chinese for
it's true.
55 years, and all you were surrounded with was by the Polish language, and you have to learn Polish and things, your Polish is probably hopefully quite good,
It's true.
but your Chinese would be almost dead, right?
Well, case in point is like my parents. There are times when they struggle with certain Chinese words
It's
because they just haven't used it,
right. Not to mention the fact that because they are here, they're not picking up the regular lingo. There is the difference of, let's say, Chinese English speakers, and in 30 years in Canada, and Chinese speakers in China, right? Of course they'll be able to communicate, but they'll mention some things that won't translate, right?
yeah.
Because of just even the thinking process is different. Again,
Well,
it will get grammar, structure, and all this kind of stuff. That kind of stuff is different. So now when you learn English grammar, so all of this stuff is just illustrating that the brain adapts.
it's
So if you give your brain a break, you will lose that structure.
okay. But here's a simple thing. That may be the case in terms of language and in terms of mathematics, right?
Mhm,
Because if you're constantly not reviewing your mathematics, yeah, you will start to forget,
mhm,
certain things that used to
mhm.
come to you naturally.
Yep.
A case where it's were very easily used. Back in high school, we all learned the proper way to structure an essay
Mhm,
would be to have an introduction, have three arguments,
mhm,
and a conclusion,
mhm.
right? And you can't tell me I'm ever going to forget that. I will always know how to write an essay. I will always know how to structure an essay and make those arguments. But I think it's okay to say, have ChatGPT to say, here's an essay I'm writing, and then here are my facts, here are my points that I want to make, and then have it structure it out, and then basically go in and edit it. You never want to you never want to forward whatever ChatGPT outputs and hand it in as an assignment,
So,
because it will make
so there's
mistakes.
the flaw.
But but
So
I
there's
think
the
it's okay. I think
so
it's
there's the
okay.
flaw. Where do you stop? Like, you're right.
Yeah,
You're never gonna forget introduction, body, conclusion.
right.
So why use ChatGPT for that then? If
Because
you're going to using ChatGPT not to give you introduction, body, conclusion, you're going to use ChatGPT to structure the information into that process.
yeah,
Right. So the process of you using your mental ability to structure, deciding which part is part of the body, which part is part of the thing, you're going to lose that. And that, by the way, is yes, that's the cognition process, because you will no longer be able to understand, I mean, obviously not, but let's say, repetitively, which point is the strongest point, as an example, to make your conclusion? Which point is an average point? How do you aggregate? Because you're no longer using your brain to compare one point versus the other. The point is, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it in the first place. You're not going to spend time to be like,
well,
well, is ChatGPT correct? Because
okay.
then, if you're doubting ChatGPT is correct, then why would you use the tool?
This is why it's the shortcut, right? So ChatGPT can give you the structure and the framework, right? And then, so rather than you taking, say, 3 hours to build that framework and to make those arguments,
But I
right?
think your point,
Then
you're changing your point. Your original point was you're never going to forget the basic structure. Correct.
yeah,
You don't need ChatGPT for the basic structure. Unless, except for the learning from the beginning. Like you taught that from the beginning. So that's a different point. Once you learn it, you're never going to learn that. Now you're saying, well, but ChatGPT is going to divide the points for me. The thinking for you. That's my point. So if
yeah,
ChatGPT does the thinking for you enough times, you have no reason to be doing that thinking in your head. So as soon as you give that cognitive function away to ChatGPT or whatever the thing is, you no longer have a reason to do this. And the whole point of essays, like one of the reasons why I think maybe some people will disagree with this, but I generally felt like English was criminally less important. Like most people always emphasize math and science. And don't get me wrong, math and
mm,
science is important.
yeah,
But the one thing that people forget that all thought happens in language, which is
yeah,
why, to me, language is more important than math and science because you can't have math and science about language. But your thoughts are in language.
yeah,
So why essays? They're not supposed to. The purpose of an essay isn't to teach you how to compare Huckleberry Finn versus I don't know. 1984 or something, whatever, right? That's not the purpose of the essay.
yeah,
The purpose of the essay, if it asks you, let's say that question, is for you, let's say, find the commonalities, something. So you sit there, and as a student, you're raking your brain because as a kid you don't know these things. Like, okay, what are the similarities things? What are the similar events in this that happen? So it's like mathematics, right? What is equal to this? What is equal to that, right? And again, of course, in English, it's more of a what's the word? It's less it's more difficult to mark, right? Because it's a little bit more opinionated. That's why, for example, teachers in a good teacher in English will always say to you, "Give me reasons why you thinking this way," and all this kind of stuff. And or like, there's no wrong thinking English as long as you can back it up with reasonable kind of thought, right? That thought process, if you let GPT do it for you, then you lose it. And then you have people who read a newspaper and they're not able to interpret the fact. What's the good? What's the bad? We don't have enough people to compare these things. We have people who are like want to shut themselves off from certain parts of it. And because they want to shut themselves off from certain parts of it, they're no longer able to critically analyze things, right? That's the whole point of critical thinking.
yeah.
So again, ChatGPT also takes away from, or I mean, I don't want to say whatever AI platform you have will also take that away from you. So I agree with you that there are certain simple things that you can use this tool for. But then the question is, why would you use them for anyways? Because it's like saying, well, the AI platform can help me do my calculations for me. Okay, great, but I already know the numbers. Well, okay, I think where people find advantage in these tools is exactly the thing that I think you mentioned in the beginning is it's simplified things. It makes things faster,
Yeah.
right? And now to go on your side, I think the only way I don't think it's good, and I will never say now. I think hopefully at the end I'll just gonna state my whole idea of this, but I can see there being some use in really high level okay, I don't know, let's say calculations. Let's say you're doing
Analysis.
analysis to help you compare one degree change of a column versus this kind of thing. There could be a mathematical equation from an engineer. Yes, okay. I can see that being, and even that I can see that's kind of dangerous too, because then if the human engineer no longer sees the difficulties with these things, and only the AI does, then again, we have engineers now who are starting losing the capability, right?
Yeah.
So I feel that we're essentially moving towards Wally. I am sitting there drinking their thing and everything's done for them. And it's just like, okay, but do we really want humanity in that? Because the reality is that if I give you a simpler road, 99% of people will take that simpler road. There's very few people in this life who will actually take the hard road just for the sake of doing it hard, or for whatever reasons. There are people like that, but I don't
Yeah.
think they're very common.
But I think with today, right, as adults, I'm talking to adults now, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
In employment, uh, AI platforms have become really, really important in helping to speed up and making work more efficient, right? It does take away the whole thought process,
Hmm.
but we still have to do, because AI is not perfect, it still hallucinates.
Right.
we still have to do some of the thinking for it. For those who don't know, hallucinations is basically when AI will randomly generate something that's not true, right? So they may introduce a random fact that is basically totally out of the blue, not relevant to whatever it is, or it might just outright lie, right? So those are what hallucinations are. And you have to be very careful that when you use AI platforms, you got to watch for those hallucinations. Sometimes those hallucinations can be prevented if you prompt the AI platform correctly.
Mhm.
You can then avoid some of these hallucinations. But in the end, I use AI a lot, and basically every time I use it, I watch for these hallucinations. I read everything to make sure that it's in my own voice. I will even reword some of the stuff that it's doing, that it's saying in my own words, right? Because I'm one of those people who actually I have a lot of difficulty um, when it comes to writing. Uh, it's not that I don't write enough, but when it comes to writing, it's just that I have a tendency to want to over perfect the wording, which then ends up is something that something like an email, like a simple email that should only take me about 5 minutes to respond. I actually would struggle there for like half an hour to 45 minutes to
I'm
do
the
it.
same. I'm
Right.
the same.
So I think something like that, it can be very simply just toss it in ChatGPT, bang, 2 minutes
But
later
see,
it comes out,
but I
right?
go back to that and say, well, I would never want to give away that function from me because that struggle is actually what makes me a better writer. And I mean, the perception that I don't write enough, I would say, no, actually, it is because you don't write enough. Now, and I don't mean it in any bad way, but my point is, some people are natural, some people are not, right? Like some people will pick that up and don't have to worry about these things. And it's also your kind of level of comfort kind of thing. Because I totally hear
Yeah.
you. Yeah, I could
Yeah.
spend 45 minutes of an email that should take me 5
Yeah.
because I'm looking at it and I'm always double like second guessing myself. Does this person really understand what I'm saying? And maybe my tone is wrong and all this kind of stuff, right? But what ends up happening, there's a couple of things. One is practice does kind of remove that, and maybe practice is like 10,000 times. But the other thing is it's also like limited time, right? You get to a
Yeah.
point where it's like, you know what? If that person misunderstands, it's on them. They have, so I guess what I'm saying is practice will take care of almost everything, I think, right? And the fact that you haven't necessarily reached that level doesn't necessarily mean that it's not practice. It's just that you haven't reached to that level, right?
Yeah.
Um, but okay, so this is the the one side of it. But I want to point out there's a couple other things that I think AI doesn't cover. Something very important: emotions and human interaction, right? So there is something to be said, I think, that we don't really have any studies on this from the AI side, is how does a student, let's say you do have an AI teacher, how does that affect absorption of knowledge? We don't know.
Hmm.
We don't like, I mean, maybe there are studies out there. I don't think there are, but and there certainly is. Like, how does it really matter? Maybe it doesn't. But is a person's intellect or the brain less willing to listen to an image than a human being?
Yeah.
Okay. The other side of it, another aspect of in terms of the emotions, stuff like that, discipline.
Yeah.
So I don't care how that's scary, how evil that AI looks. You can have Freddy Krueger teaching you, but he's not really going to come in your dream and scare the hell out of you, right? The point is, yeah, another episode, discipline, all this kind of stuff, and I think we talked about this a little bit before in other episodes, but it's much easier for a physical human to exude a certain level of authority or a certain level of or love or focus or whatever it is, right? That a student responds to,
Right.
right? We and again, I haven't seen any studies of this, and maybe there are, and even the problem with today's world that even the studies that are, a lot of them are just lies anyways, because a lot of studies are so poorly done. So we don't even if somebody shows me a study, it could still be like, right? But we don't have enough information. I think that's basically what I can say for us to know how does a student, let's say first, how does a 7-year-old versus 17-year-old versus 27-year-old versus a 70-year-old respond to an inanimate thing, which that's what it
Screen.
is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Teaching you without I mean, so even if there is an interaction between the AI and you, and it can perceive your facial expressions and all this kind of stuff, it's like, oh yeah, this expression means this is 99% certainty, but there's always that 1%. So my point is, will that potentially hinder the learning process? I certainly think in discipline, yes, it will,
Mhm.
because you have you have students now who are, and again, this is the problem of last generation. Like, I'm really coming to the conclusion that a lot of the problems of this generation is really on us and the generation after us. You millennials, yes, you get another blame here, because you can't really expect young people. You can't, if you don't create an environment that's going to help young people grow, you can't expect them for not growing. Yeah, sorry, you can blame them for not growing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I've read studies recently talking about how young people are more violent today because of social media. They have less attention spans. They're less, more soft. They're not as thick skinned and all these kind of things, right? Which is why you have all this Twitter crap and all this kind of stuff. But um, so again, you can't blame these people for that because we didn't enforce it as much, right? And I know there's a whole contingent saying, like, all discipline is bad. I don't agree with that. I think at a certain point, human beings need training, just like any other animal, right? And we can talk about the soul and this kind of stuff, as a side. But humans who grow up in a society, unless there is some level of discipline, whatever that discipline is acceptable, do not usually succeed, do not push forward, right? Because again, generally speaking, they'll take the easiest way out, right? So how do you incorporate that into AI teaching? And how, and then the other aspect I would say is, like, so you got teachers who, a lot of, and I think that's, again, a problem, teachers who use AI to correct. And as I've said this already, I think that makes the teacher dumb, because eventually they lose that function themselves. So if a teacher loses that critical function, how can he or she teach? But that's an aside. But the other aspect is the a I've heard a lot of it. Oh, we can have, AI can help you create individualized teaching. Well, how useful is individualized teaching when you still have 35 students in a classroom?
Yeah.
AI doesn't solve that problem. It actually makes it more difficult for the teacher, because now the teacher actually knows, okay, now I got 35 learning students. Like before, the teacher
Yeah.
assumes this, but they just do one size fits all. You can't, even with AI, you still have the numbers problem. So my point of all of this is that, like, and I think, for my stance is that I think all technology should be eliminated from students. 100%. You don't need a cell phone. You don't need anything, nothing until you're at least in your 20s, because, it- again, studies will tell you the brain doesn't really finish forming until like 20, 21, 22 years old, right?
Yeah.
So when your brain is, it's still plastic for, probably forever, right?
Forever. Yeah.
But it's a lot less than when you're young,
Yeah.
right? So the fact that it's accepted in society to have cell phones for children and all this kind of stuff, I think it's criminal. And I think that's what's leading to a lot of the problems that we have, like lack of attention, lack of focus, lack of critical thinking, right? Leads to an easily manipulated population. That's what I feel. And maybe that's the issue. I don't know.
Yeah.
But if you take all that out and you do it the traditional way, like we did, and then you can drop technology on. Like, the reality of it is I don't think particularly, especially if you have AI, technology is that hard to learn. So even if you drop, even let's say, and hopefully in the future, yeah, that's one of the visions we have for the company, is have as little technology as possible. If you take that out when they're building the knowledge process and then drop it in at a later date, I don't think you're hurting. I don't actually think a child who grows up with AI will ever be smarter than a child who doesn't. As a child, maybe they'll have easier ways of knowing how to program AI and all this kind of stuff. That's useless, because the core knowledge will not be there, right? Right? Like, people of our age, we can talk about it because you made that point. We already have the fundamentals in our heads.
Yeah.
Correct. But you take a child, you have a baby today, and you go through all these things right now. Like, you and I remember in Poland, when I came to Canada, my multiplication in grade one, I learned multiplication tables till 12. I came to Canada in grade four, and kids were still doing like six or something. I thought they were like, "What the hell's wrong with you people?" Right? And how was that done? It was done through what a lot of teachers would frown upon. I had to stand up in front of the entire class, and the teacher pointed at me and said nonsense. And yes, I hated it. And yes, it was bad, but it was good because, and I realized like a lot of people, people always make this like, oh, but I get it. I get it. Here's the thing about that: you can't do individual for every kid either. It's impossible,
Right.
right? You have how many millions of children in Canada? You can't have a program for individuals. At a certain point, you have to have standardization.
Yeah. No.
And that is also a benefit because society works on standardization. So if you are approaching your student standardization, you are teaching them to go along the standard, and that's actually there's a benefit to that. What I think is there should be some like let's say focus on some of the kids who don't fall into that standardization. I fully agree with that. But even that cannot be all individualized. So, we talk about first, we'll say we have an individual program for you. You can have an individual program of Inspired Scholar when you have one-on-one teacher student, right? Because
Yeah.
it's easy. It's like me, the student, whatever, no problem. But as soon as we in a group classes, it's a little bit more difficult to have individualized students because even for group of four, we can obviously still focus more on that program for your kids, or your your high school, whatever, or even adults, uh, than we could with 20, right? But it's obviously not the same as one, right? So I think I generally my personally like as you can tell I'm pretty passionate about this. I actually feel it's very very dangerous, not because not because of um uh, taking jobs or anything like that. I think that's bad too. Don't get me wrong, but I truly think that at least right now, until we have AI that is just like you or I am, and I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but if until and I've heard some people said it's already like that. I don't know enough. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But until we have AI that can be indistinguishable from a human being, I think we because I think at that point the AI will be intelligent enough. It will include emotions and all these kind of things. Because right now, even AI, it's not going to when it analyzes the student's data, it doesn't analyze their emotional responses. It just
No.
analyzes the grades, right?
Right. Right.
So again, you see, and I think I like as much as I understand it, like you cannot focus on everything in every single topic, right? But on the other side, everything has a certain level of emotion. Like what kept me from learning some things was emotion,
Mhm.
right? Whether it was stress, anger, lack of focus, which was maybe emotional, fear,
Mhm.
right? I mean, the common thing you go to test, your brain goes blank. Why? Because you're afraid of failing. Duh. Right? How does AI beat that?
Yeah. So, excuse me. My take on, because I'm pro technology,
Mm,
it's technology will never go away, right? And it'll always be there. And people will always find a way around it,
mm,
right? The way I see it, I spent a couple of nights thinking about this,
mhm.
and basically the way I see it, education up until this point, or for actually since its inception,
Mm.
education has been more about downloading skill sets to the students. I'm generalizing, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's fine. It's like,
but
yeah,
but
yeah.
my take on it is that I think schools need to actually, and this touches on your point, uh, schools need to kind of reinvent themselves to basically, yes, push off technology, uh, to not necessarily focus on the technology side of it, but to and not focus on the content because nowadays content's just all over the internet. You can find a ton of
Yeah,
stuff on the internet, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
less about
yeah.
shift the education away from content downloading and more focus on the emotional aspect, right? Focus more on the actual learning. You cannot just rip away the technology side of it
Hmm.
and just say
Hmm.
don't touch it, don't ever use it. But you can teach them to think properly, right? And basically through whatever courses you're doing, give them the exercise that allow them to develop in terms of emotionally and also develop develop the proper habits, the discipline,
Hmm.
right? And so that it gets instilled in them and then introduce AI later, implement AI practice later, push it off for later, and then that way they get the best of both worlds,
But
right?
I would say even what I mean, don't even need to incorporate AI. Like I would say you can use AI. That my point is what you like I agree, you can't put the genie back in the bottle, right? It is what it is. But I think yes, maybe and by the way, when I said depends on the level of school you went, what I meant was not like better or higher school. I'm talking about there's some schools where just focus on the individual kind of thing, small classrooms, all this kind of stuff. And also some teachers, for example, like a lot of teachers that I had were more focused on showing me how to think, not what to think, and all this kind of stuff, right?
Right.
So back to the thing, yes, go away from the content and have AI focus on um, how does the human brain learn, right? Now, again, the problem with that is that we don't actually really know that. Like there are some, I'm sure there'll be some neurologists who hopefully one day, if there's any neurologists watching, will tell us we're wrong. But so well, we actually know this, but there's still lots of questions, right? Where's the memory stores? Where all these things? How does cognition happen? All this kind of stuff. And there's a lot of ideas, but there's still a lot of questions. So if we still have questions, how is AI? Maybe AI can figure that out. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
But if it does, how do we apply that knowledge to increase the capability of the student learning, and make it individual enough, but also go away from um, uh, uh, teaching you how to write essays or how to think. You should learn that through experience. But maybe having AI create exercises, as an example, that teach you how to think,
Right.
right? And because I think one of the best ways to learn is that's from doing, let's say.
Yeah.
So we have an
Yeah.
environment or we have an AI exercise that essentially shows you like what. And again, see, I'm Mr. Negative here. I can always see the negative of this side. But if you're looking at, let's say, a historical essay and you're looking at things, how horrible things were for those people, imagine an AI that can actually bring you into that environment and you can actually see how those people suffered and actually, see, like, that would give you kind of thing. Now, again, what's the negative side of this? Well, you're taking your imagination away.
Yeah.
Right. And I think like we always, as much as I love video games, MMOs and whatnot, there is a little bit of hinkling to me that like, okay, I like World of Warcraft, but in some ways it can never compare to a D&D campaign when we used to sit there and
Yes.
right
Yes.
because sure you would go and you would say there's an ogre and we kind of all understood what ogre, but your ogre will look different than my ogre, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of imagination in a way I think may be lost if we give all this information to the student or
Yes.
kind of thing, right? And I
Yes.
think that I don't, to be honest with you, I agree with you. It can't be, you can't put the genie back. We have to figure out the best way how to deal with it.
Mhm.
But the worry of it is that it could essentially be something that does really kill the human spirit in a sense, like the human, like innovation and all this kind of stuff, right? Like Einstein, imagination is more important than knowledge, right? So like if you get AI who's like I guess what I'm trying to say is a lot of times the struggle is the learning process.
Yeah.
And if you use AI to remove the struggle, I don't think learning happens anymore. So it has to be a very fine-tuned program that still makes you struggle. And at that point, what is the point of AI? Why can't you just have another person do it for you?
Well, no, that's why I think we're both at the same point where education schools have to re-engineer what is their ultimate purpose, right? And basically
Yes.
follow that pattern based on the tools that we have now.
Hmm.
What's
Hmm.
detrimental to the students
Yeah.
and where, like ultimately in the end, yeah, what makes us human,
Yeah.
right? And then follow that path in terms of, okay, developing thought processes,
Hmm.
developing
Hmm.
good
Hmm.
habits, developing this discipline, isolate what is the human condition.
And see,
And yeah.
so I think the bottom line is we don't have that AI because that AI would be us. If
Yes.
well, maybe I'm wrong, but it should be at a level like in order for the AI to understand the human condition, it has to have to be
Human.
realistically speaking. That's a very different discussion. Will we ever get there? All this kind of stuff. I think for educational purpose right now, as it currently stands, I see more damage than good,
Yeah.
right? And I think what you said is very correct. Schools have to decide what they want to be, but I think they've been asking that question for a long time, and they haven't found an answer. So, like generally, right? So, people will say, well, schools are just factories for producing workers, and whatever. And yeah, that may be true, and or schools are just something, to help you focus, whatever. Uh, I don't know if I guess the bottom line will be this. I don't think it should be answered by AI. It should be answered by us.
Yes.
And the problem I think we're heading into is that there's too many people that want AI to do that answer, and then therefore have the student, that I think impacts just like that's a question to be even beyond education.
Yeah.
That's just a question of
Yeah.
human life kind of thing, and it's way ahead of us, right? But I think let's just we should be ending and let's just I'm not gonna say agree to disagree because I think we're kind of like more or less in the middle. As I said, I'm seeing more the detriment, and I really believe we need to really focus on making sure that it doesn't make a bunch of dumb, lazy students.
Yeah.
And I think from your side, you're basically saying like, well, the genie's out, so we got to
Yeah.
know how to deal with it,
Yeah.
right? So I think essentially, what I think really the answer a lot of times is just that usually you don't listen to a guy like me or a guy like you listen to both of us, right?
Yeah.
You get the two sides of the
Compare.
issue, compare, contrast, and then you try to develop something you're never going to find a perfect answer, but something that's more or less kind of thing. Because yes, you can't put the genie back, but at the same time, you got to be really careful because if five generations over and we're in what is it, idiocracy?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. So that wraps it up for today's topic. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next day.